So if I were to ask one of you, what is technology? How would you define technology? There's no right or wrong answer for this. Just whatever association comes to mind when I say technology. Tools? That's a good definition. Somebody else give me a different one?
The amount of knowledge required to make an easier systematic approach of living.
Mm-hmm. Could you agree with that definition?
Yeah.
Any other ideas? I agree with both of you. How I would specifically define it is, you're using basically the laws of nature to influence nature to yield a specific result. So we have external technologies, and generally when we talk technologies, you're thinking machinery, something physical and tangible. But technology doesn't have to be limited to that. Yoga itself is a technology in exactly the same sense. You're using the laws of nature in the system to influence nature to yield a specific end result, which in this case we are referring to as human well-being. And the beautiful thing about a technology is totally unprejudiced, completely unprejudiced. Its only interest is in cause and effect. So that's why it has had such mass influence all over the world. Whether you look in China, whether it's in America, whether it's in Australia, whether it's in India, everywhere you look in the world, our modern technologies had such mass influence because it's not really so much concerned with philosophies and belief systems that you've invented in the mind. The only interest is, can you put it to systematic use to yield a specific end result? So yoga in that sense is definitely a technology. We're not referring to a theory or a belief system. That's why if you look in the East, the things that the way that yoga has been employed, you'll find Buddhists have practiced yoga, Hindus have practiced yoga, Jains have practiced yoga, atheists have practiced yoga, Sikhs have practiced yoga. So many different theories and belief systems, yet they've all made use of the same technology of yoga. And after all, the emphasis in the East was, it's not that there's no different theories or belief systems in the East. There are plentiful belief systems and theories in the East. But it is interesting to note that if you look in the East, there is no exact word for philosophy. Search everywhere, you will not find a word for philosophy. The closest word that comes to philosophy is something which in Sanskrit is called darshan. And darshan, have you heard the word darshan? What does it mean?
Yeah.
But you're not Indian, right?
Same in my language actually.
It is? Can you tell me?
I don't know the exact meaning of the word, but I heard it.
Oh, you don't know any clue about?
It's like an ideology, I guess. Something
Well, it means something quite different. Darshan, it literally means to see. We are not concerned about thinking about truth. To think about truth, it will be just like a blind man who's dreaming about light. It's seen in that sense. It literally means to see. Again, it's not because there's no belief systems or philosophies in the East, but the emphasis is entirely different. The emphasis here is on perception. Out of coming to certain states of experience and perception, then many interpretations have arisen as to what it is that has been discovered, but the emphasis was always on direct perception. So the approach, whichever tradition you may consider, still the approach is very practical and down to earth. They say, okay, here's a hypothesis. Here's a hypothesis. You don't have to accept it, you don't have to reject it, you don't need to believe or disbelieve in it. However, along with the hypothesis, here is a method to explore, to experiment, to verify whether such dimensions exist or not. When we talk about sadhana, which is spiritual practice, we are actually talking about an experiment, an internal experiment. Here, the laboratory lies within your own system, and you're also the scientist. You are the scientist, you are the laboratory, you are the experiment. So I would like you to become equipped with the technology in such a way that you become so familiar with your own system, the mechanism of your own mind, the mechanism of your own body, that what we call well-being, anything which you approach consciously, that will be a stepping stone for your well-being. So, to assist this, I think one problem that a lot of people have is that we're not really having a rational approach to things. We're operating too much overwhelmed by our emotion. Would you say what's the strongest element within a human being? What would you say? Is it intellect, or is it more their instinct and emotion? Definitely, I would say it's more instinct and emotion. So, developing the rational ability of the mind can be tremendously helpful if it's not misguided. There are ways that it could be very misguided. I'll give you an example. Do you know that there are some mathematicians are very well aware of this, because you can create mathematical theories and conclusions which otherwise have no basis in reality at all. On the paper it looks so logically perfect, but when it comes to performing experiments, and that's beginning stage of scientific exploration, you have just the mathematical equations, but then you have to involve yourself in an experiment in the laboratory to verify whether such a thing is true or not. So there may be mathematical explanations which are logically, they're just dead on, so sharp and precise, but otherwise the conclusions are totally false. Like, have you heard of sophists? Are you Greek? Oh, you're Italian, right, you're Italian. You know, in ancient Greece, there were a group of people which were called sophists. And these people were, well, first I have to tell you that the system of law that used to exist in ancient Greece was very different from today's system of law. Today, when you go into the court system, you can actually hire a defendant, and he'll defend your case in the court. But in ancient Greece, it was not so. You did not have a defendant. You had to learn how to defend yourself in the court. So what used to happen was people would hire sophists. Who are these sophists? They are people who are brilliantly trained in the art of logic. So they will be able to present you such a logically convincing case, for example, to prove that God exists. Almost unbreakable logic. But if he wants, he can bend his argument to support just the opposite. So that's what I'm talking about when I say your reason can be misguided. Reason, after all, it's just a tool in your hands. And just see, whenever you're functioning in your life, your reason and your emotion are never operating separately from each other. I would say emotion actually has an evolutionary function. It has a function for human life. Being that, just imagine if you did not have any emotion, how difficult would your decision-making process be? You would not be able to discriminate what has value and what doesn't have value for you. Every decision that you make has a certain emotional basis to it. So we shouldn't think as though reason is here on one side, emotion is here on one side. For some people, maybe one or the other will be a stronger force on the mind. But realistically speaking, you are a melting pot where all the parts are working collectively together. You can't think this is reason operating separate from emotion, this is emotion operating separate from instinct, this is instinct operating separately from intuitive intelligence. So we want, when we talk about yoga, we want to understand human nature holistically, as a holistic, complete, wholesome being. We are no longer divided into small bits and fragments. So this is the one problem with human life. We are taking small, limited aspects of our being, and we are magnifying it as if it was everything. So there are some people who are so deeply identified with their body, they think they are only the body. Even though if we examine that, it cannot be true. What's your body made of? It's made of atoms. You know, atoms are 99.9% empty space, right? That means most of your body is actually empty space, not physical matter. And going beyond that, today the modern science is talking about dimensions of energy which cannot be measured in any way at all, which is non-physical, which they're calling dark energy. So everything that's made of physical matter, including atoms, you, your body, every single object around you, those atoms of matter is made of only 4% of the universe. The larger percent of the universe is made of what they're calling dark matter and dark energy, which is 96% of the universe combined. That shows you how little modern science knows. That's a bit like you live on the surface of the earth, which is mostly made of water, yet you do not even know what is water. And water is 70%, this is 96%, which is much more than that. So, your body cannot be, you cannot even look at your own body only on physical terms, is what I'm saying. Some people, they're very deeply identified with their emotion. They stretch out the emotion as if it was everything. Other people, they're identified with the intellect. And whatever you are identified with, it doesn't matter what it is, that is basically your ego. How can I describe egotism? I would describe it as, just take this again as a hypothesis. Everything in nature has an inborn nature. When I say an inborn nature, I mean a basic nature that's there. It doesn't matter, nothing can be added or subtracted to it. You might add many things on top of that, but still there's a basic nature which always remains unchanged. Do you get me? So it's like the foundation of a pyramid. Everything has this basic foundation. What I would call egotism is you are mistaking the objects of knowledge, what the eyes see, what the nose smells, what the ears hear, what the mind thinks. Objects of knowledge, anything that is known to you, you're mistaking the objects of knowledge as if it is your inborn nature. So, we might create many different self-images. I'm a Christian, I'm a Buddhist, I'm an American, I'm a Chinese. But these are all, I've always said this, they are literally like masks we've created over this inborn nature. So what is that inborn nature? What is that nature within you which cannot be created or destroyed? If you come to know that dimension and it is realized that this is one and the same as the nature at work through the whole universe, won't you live your life fearlessly? You must live your life fearlessly. See how much in your life you're operating out of fear. Just compare the percentage when you're operating out of genuine happiness and when you're operating out of fear. Which one wins? We're sincere most of the time, just about everything we do. Attachment to knowledge, attachment to relationship, attachment to wealth. So many levels of attachment. All of this is coming out of fear. Right? What is the fear always? The fear is, how can I preserve this limited identity? So, if we talk about expanding your perception, we're talking about coming to know of other aspects of who you are, which is not limited to your identity. So, I've always said this, every human being is carrying a tremendous wealth within himself. Everything that is needed for your well-being is right here in this mind and body. Only question is, do you have access to it? If we strive towards it, if we work towards it, every human being can have access to this. except maybe rare conditions if you have, let's say, brain damage. Some people have brain damage where no matter what, they're just insane because of a physical problem in the body. But that aside, if you have a healthy body, if you have a healthy brain, really nothing more is needed than that. You have all the tools within you that is necessary for your well-being. Only question is, do you have access to it? So when we talk about this technology of yoga, we are talking about a method to access it. Like any technology, it's just like a child learning how to walk. For now we take it for granted we are walking on an everyday basis. So simple and effortless because we've repeated it so many times. But for a child who's just learning how to walk, just one step in front of the other, oh, how difficult does it seem? And he has to stumble again and again. But the beauty about experiment is that you can fail as many times as necessary. As many times as necessary to set you on the right track. And if you just pay a little bit of attention to the obstacles, don't figure out where to go. You don't know where to go. You don't have the slightest clue where to go. Everything we know about life, it's only compared to our previous experience, right? So any new dimension is, we can only imagine upon it. We can have beliefs about it, but we still don't really know what it is, right? So we fail many times. With every failure, if you're paying a little bit of attention to the obstacles that are work within you, every failure can be transformed into a success if only we begin to have a conscious approach. So don't be discouraged by whatever obstacles you may experience in your practice. This is natural because now you're walking against the stream. Your whole programming is dictating, I'm going to move this way, nowhere else except this way. But now you're functioning a little bit more out of your own intelligence. You're moving against the stream. Your body and mind wants to resist change. We are creatures of habit. So let's first understand, how are we creatures of habit? Rather than figuring out how can we replace ourselves with a better version, a more sophisticated version, a replacement for the old self, which means maybe you have more sophisticated delusions, more sophisticated misunderstandings. Do you know the mischief people are doing in the name of self-improvement? Positive thinking. Why? So they can make millions of dollars. Nothing wrong with $1 million, but I doubt you can seek $1 million without it strengthening your greed. That's the madness that's happening in the name of self-improvement. You want to improve yourself so you can achieve your power trips, your ambitions in the mind. Here we're not talking about that. First, let's understand ourselves as we are. Self-observation. Let's look at the facts. What are the facts of our life? What are the facts of our being? That takes a lot of courage, because you must be willing to allow reason to take you wherever it leads, even in the most unpleasant places. Because the truth of life and the truth of things does not have any obligation to fit into the story you created in your mind. So that's why if we want to involve ourselves in any kind of exploration, best to approach it with a beginner's mind. It reminds me of a small story of a student, no, not a student, a university professor. He came to see a Zen master. He wanted to learn about Zen, so he waited to receive the teaching. The master went, and as is the custom when you visit the master, he will serve some tea. So he brought some tea. He poured the tea into the cup, and he kept on pouring and pouring. Suddenly the cup was overflowing. The professor said, "Stop." Nothing more is going to enter into the cup. What on earth are you doing? The Zen master said, just like this cup, you've come here with all your beliefs, your assumptions, your speculations. How can I really show you the way of Zen unless you first empty your cup? That's what it means when we say one is a seeker. You seek. Of course, you have your prejudices, you have your assumptions, but at least the willingness to doubt, at least that much should be there. How do you know your assumptions have any roots in reality? Otherwise, if you don't have that approach, really, you ever heard of confirmation bias? The term confirmation bias? It means when you're exploring into something or you're experimenting into something, you're not looking at it objectively, you're looking at it, you want the experiment to conform to your own beliefs. So what happens is you look at the evidence, then you bend the evidence according to your preferences. So, in other words, if the evidence can be made to confirm your belief, you're more than happy, which can be done. So, having a balanced approach to exploration needs a bit of time to develop, but if the willingness is there at least, then that's an excellent starting point. The willingness to doubt, that alone can take you many places. Maybe your beliefs have some truthfulness to it. I don't know. However, what I do know is, do you ever hear of a scientist saying he believes in the sun? He knows the sun exists. So if you know something, if you know it without a doubt, doesn't the need to believe disappear? And if you don't know, why can we not be genuine enough just to recognize I don't know? Do you see what I'm saying? So in both cases, why drag the need for belief? Belief is there because there's some uncertainty and doubt within you. And most of our beliefs in the world are intended, if you look at it, we're so attached to our beliefs. We're using them as a way to protect our fragile identity. This is like an insurance program. Cosmic insurance from the universe, in case anything goes wrong. So let's be practical, let's be down to earth. The beautiful thing about yoga is you don't have to accept anything on the basis of belief. Just explore into this system. Your own system already has all the answers you're seeking in life. Because the whole nature is at work here. This system is like a history book of nature. There is no greater scripture than the book of nature. There is more truthfulness on a single blade of grass or a single grain of sand on a beach than all the scriptures and philosophies that have been invented by human beings. That's part of the meaning of darshan, to see. We're talking more about being. Through being, the quality of being, through deepening your presence, you align yourself with the way of the creation. Existence, does existence know any theories? Does existence know any philosophies? The only thing existence knows is existence, being. So I would say a moment of attention, a moment of truly being attentive and present, that contains much more truthfulness than all the brilliant logical explanations that you can give.